Let's go to Gridiron Blitz and all things the NFL. Yeah, we'll delve in. Here's my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. If you noticed earlier this week, he reported to camp, not a surprise. A lot of people were saying he wasn't going to report to camp, he was going to be a holdout, all of this other stuff. No, he knew this offseason, I think, was just a lot of talk. Him with the going with the passive aggressive stuff. You hear him talk about things, but then not talk about his disagreement with the Packers and all the stuff going on. But he's a smart man. And I know they say usually when you get fined for not reporting to camp, they don't really they fine you in the books, but they don't really take the money. But he doesn't want to look like the bad guy in all of this, and you could hear that in the press conference, which we'll get to in a moment. But I knew that he was going to report to camp and he wasn't going to risk potentially losing any type of money. And then also perception wise, because if he holds out, he ends up looking like the selfish guy and the bad guy and everything along those lines. So I was saying from day one, he was going to report to camp and he did. I saw the press conference, good portion of it. A lot of it was for show. One, he's not happy being there. If he had his choice, I think he would have preferred to be traded and go to another organization. And a lot of this ties to Tom Brady as well. He's seen what Brady has done in Tampa. From Noah Brady is 20 years in New England, all those championships, but he saw that his relationship with Bill Belichick, who was the ultimate boss of that team. I know Robert Kraft's the director, the the owner of the team, but Belichick is the director. He's the general manager. He's the head coach. He's the man who runs everything. Brady just felt that he wasn't comfortable in getting what he needed there, so he moved on to Tampa, and the Bucks welcomed him with open arms. What type of playing system do you want to run, Tom? And I know Arians is there, and he's an offensive mastermind and a lot of experience. But Brady, what do you want to run? Who do you want to bring in? You want to bring in your best buddy Gronkowski from New England and bring him to Tampa, get him to unretire? Sure, let's make that happen. Who do you want us to draft in the first round? Hey, there's a big offensive tackle out of Iowa in Words. We want to draft him so I can be protected. Okay, sure, we can do that. Antonio Brown, we're buddies. I got him to come to New England. It didn't work out there, but we have a relationship. Let's bring him in. Leonard Fournette, time ran out or ending didn't go well. And with Jacksonville, the running back, he's available. Let's scoop him up. All of that aggression is as a result of the organization listening to Tom Brady and bringing them in. And ultimately, it ended up being a championship. And you don't think Aaron Rodgers is looking across the sideline, literally in an NFC Championship game, and seeing everything that went on there, and didn't want to be in that same situation with Green Bay? He wanted that type of thing. And Green Bay, their perception around the league over the years, and it started off with Ted Thompson, and now with Gutekunst, the new general manager, and everything like that. The Packers, they draft well. They like to bring in talent in that way. But once guys are up for extensions or due to make big money, they don't like to sign them. They like to release them. And they like to keep bringing in a lot of young guys and in homegrown talent. They're not very aggressive with free agency. I mentioned with New England, all of those guys with the, and New England was kind of in the same way as well when Brady was there. And Brady went to Tampa, and as I mentioned, they brought a lot of those guys, or free agents, were being very aggressive in that regard. So Rodgers looking at all of that, and he wants the same thing to be in Green Bay, but we've seen the reputation and the actions of Green Bay is counter to that. So we see him in that press conference, and kind of with the woe is me look. I'm so sad. I've told you hear me. I told the organization now that it's not about the money. You've had all these players that they haven't brought back in the past, from Clay Matthews to Charles Woodson and everything like that. I'm just the poor worker, and the bosses have not listened to me, and I wanted to get more respect in that regard and things like that. Like, let's slow down on a lot of this stuff. First of all, this could have been done in silence. all the things that he's saying, and he had the nerve to say that all of these things that happened in the off season, these quote unquote leaks, did not come from him, and all of this his unhappiness with the organization. And he said he was assured he was assured by his team, I guess his agents and managers, that they weren't leaking information. That's crap. And a lot of these athletes. And I'm not saying Rodgers is a sociopath or a bad guy, but he has his sources. Whether it's Adam Schefter on draft night and saying about him not wanting to come back to Green Bay. We have his buddy and AJ Hawk. He's coming out with statements. Jones, his former wide receiver. Pat McAfee, who he does a really good weekly show with during the season. He's doing stuff with them. McAfee is very involved in a big media presence now. He has plenty of sources or people that he's kind of leaking information to. All the major athletes do it. So I'm not saying he should be tar and feathered in the middle of the town square for it, but to act like he's the innocent one and I don't know where all this information is coming from. You know exactly where this is coming from. So to have that perspective, I thought was a little narrow-minded. But as I said, a lot of this could have been done in silence and done behind closed doors. And that passive aggressiveness in the public was, I thought, unnecessary. And also, all the players that he mentioned, as I said, from Clay Matthews and Charles Woodson, and his unhappiness with them not consulting him and bringing those players back, into the organization. All those things happened before he signed that big contract extension with them 2 years ago, and a contract that he's currently under now that he had to restructure. So he had all of these issues in the past. If he had these issues with all these guys leaving in the past, why did he not address this with the organization before he signed his most recent extension? So what I'm trying to say is that this could have been done 2 years ago and avoided all of this drama and all this pettiness, things that are going on. So it could have been done before all of this got to this point. And the timing is off as well. He has restructured his contract. In essence, he's in a lame duck position. So this will be his last year in Green Bay. He's on a 1 year contract, and then after that, he'll be able to part well, go to be a free agent, and not necessarily be a free agent, but he can go. It'll be a lot easier for him to move to another organization. So if I'm Green Bay, the organization, and you're making all of these requests that you get player A, B, and C, you do X, Y, and Z, and you're only with me for 1 year, and I'm gonna be stuck with these players that you wanted, or you wanted to bring in, and you're the one that's gonna elevate their talent, but then you go to Denver or Carolina, or you move on to another organization, and I'm stuck with these guys. That's not good. And why is he asking them to make these moves right now? We're in training camp right now. I know they traded for Randall Cobb, and that's a nice little move for them. I don't think he's a good number two receiver. He'll be solid playing opposite side of Devontae Adams. He'll make a few catches. He's a solid player. But if you're going to make moves in free agency, like an Antonio Brown, he was available, to make a move there. He's back now with Tampa. If you're going to make a free agent move, make some trades. Trades a lot of times include draft equity, draft commodities, draft capital. All of that is done for this year. You could find some streets free agents, guys that are like veteran minimums and things along those lines, and try to bring those guys in. But if you're going to make any major moves in an off season, that's supposed to be the last off season for Aaron Rodgers, or before the off season before his final year there, it's too late for that stuff. So the timing of this is awful as well. If he wanted to do all of this stuff, he should have done it right after the NFC Championship game last year when they lost. And we'll get to this championship. He's not innocent in all of this. They should have done this right after that championship game and right before this upcoming draft. And they could have used some draft picks. And that's the time you make moves as far as free agency and trades and things along those lines. So the timing of this is very off. Now, if he's committed to be there the next 2-3 years, which he's not, and the Packers aren't committed to having him there because they have Jordan Love already in the backup position. He's entering his second year. That's where it's just a miscommunication, or it's not the guideline, or not guideline, but the calendars don't really meet up with the organization and then Rodgers' request. And then Rodgers, he has to take accountability as well. He's a multiple time MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. I don't, if you heard the show before, and I'll say it again, I don't like doing top 10 lists or top 5 lists or who's the GOAT, especially with guys who are still playing. I mean, there's some obvious ones. I think Tom Brady, even though he technically is still playing, you could probably put him as the greatest quarterback of all time. And the retirement is not really necessary for him. Or when Wayne Gretzky was playing, with even when he was with St. Louis and playing with the Rangers at the very end of his career, when he was ending his career, it was like, okay, he's the greatest of all time, even though he's still playing. We already know what's going on. And Tom Brady's probably in that category. There are only a handful of guys that he could say, okay, this probably is the greatest to play their respective position. But if you did a list and you had to do one, Rodgers would be top 10, top 20 all time. Some put him top 5, and that's a debate for another day. But point is, he is an all timer. So you're not disrespectful in that regard. But how much has he really won? And he's been put together. He's had some good teams with him. It's not like he's been in. We hear the Matthew Stafford situation with him now going to the Rams, and he was in Detroit. That organization was awful. They never drafted. They had, outside of Calvin Johnson, who's a Hall of Famer wide receiver. They've never had elite talent around him. He plays with the Lions, awfully, awfully terribly run organization. And there's arguments with that, and that's fair. And now Stafford's going to the Rams, which seems to be in a better position and organizationally. But with Rodgers and Green Bay, they've had a very good run of draft picks. They've had a very good run of putting rosters together. They have a top 5 running back in Jones. Devonta Adams, who's due for a major extension, is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. He's in the top 2 or 3 in that conversation. Solid offensive line play. Defensively, they're not awful, but they're not good, but they're not awful. It's workable. So where does Rodgers take accountability for not achieving more with the Packers? He's been to 4 NFC Championship games, including the last 2 years, and he's 1-4 in those title games. Last year or 2 years ago, he lost in a very dominant, he lost in a bad way at San Francisco. Last year against Tampa, he had chances to put that team in position to win. We all know that first and goal, or if in the late in the contest, 2 incomplete passes and a third down where he had to roll out and could have possibly ran into the end zone and scored, but threw another incomplete pass. In those 5 championship games, 8 touchdowns and 9 interceptions for a guy who has more than, I think, 300 touchdown passes in his career and less than 100 interceptions in the regular season. Something's not right in those championship games, and it's a NFL. I mean, it's football, and it's not one person's fault if you lose, and it's not only one person's efforts that lead to a win. But he's definitely a guy that is, I think, deflecting a lot of shortcomings during these big games by blaming the organization. And things aren't right. And I'm unhappy with how they've been operating. I think it's time for him to, I'll say, look in the mirror, because he's had a very good career. But I think it's very easy for him and others. A lot of deflection is going on with him as far as his shortcomings, and then the organization and the drafting of Jordan Love seems to be a very easy way for Rodgers to deflect his non-successful moments and say, I blame the organization. They've been the problem. While they have produced or developed, I think, a top 5 roster in the entire NFL. And I think a lot of quarterbacks would be very content or very happy working with the pieces that Rodgers has. And he's been a big part of elevating that talent. But you have to get good talent in there to begin with to elevate. And the Packers organization has done a good job with that. And then lastly, with Rodgers, I think it's going to be an awkward year in Green Bay. He's in camp, he's a pro, I will say that, and they're going to play very well. Now, their division is not the best. Chicago, they're I think they're in a downtick. Now they're trying to figure out their quarterback situation with Fields and with Andy Dalton. The Lions are a complete rebuild with Dan Campbell as head coach. They're going to be really bad this year. Vikings with Kirk Cousins, and they have talent on their roster. They're interesting, but they should win the division, I think. And if you win the division, obviously you put yourself in a very, very good spot. And I think Tampa obviously comes in as the NFC favorites this year. You can't deny what they're bringing back. The West is tricky. Seattle obviously has a really good team. San Francisco, you got to figure they had a lot of injuries last year. They can maybe make a nice comeback. The Rams, they look like top line wise, they look like they could be a really good team. The East, I'm not inspired by any of those teams as far as being championship contenders. I mean, someone has to win that division, probably Dallas, but do you expect Dallas to really make a run in the postseason? No. So Green Bay is going to be right. They can you can make a case that they're the second best team in the NFC, and if you're in that type of position, you can win the championship game, be in the Super Bowl, and you never know what happens from there. But I still think that this is not going to be and Rodgers not necessarily a happy-go-lucky guy anyway. He has a little bit of sarcastic, condescending tone to him, and that's not knocking his football skills, but just his approach to things. That's just the way he is. He's an aloof guy. But him going and saying, with LaFleur, the head coach, and Guzman, the general manager, saying, "Hey, everything's good. We're all happy. We're ready to go into this year with anticipation and excitement." Now you have these guys that they're professionals and they're at their job. So we'll see what happens with Green Bay and everything that goes there. As far as the rest of the NFL, I don't really see any major news as far as the offseason goes. I know Dak Prescott, or as far as training camp, I know Dak Prescott, I guess he's dealing with a lat or arm injury. As long as he didn't tear anything, they're just going to sit him out. And you can see that they're going to be cautious with him anyway, coming back from the broken leg. So I'm not too concerned about that. Now, the COVID policy, we'll see how it all works out. Now, Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Ravens, we already saw he is in protocol. He tested positive for COVID. Here's the thing about the COVID, it ties to the Olympics and really all the sports. They're going to have to figure out if I'm vaccinated and I go through the proper channels and get my vaccination and prove it and everything like that, you can still test positive for COVID. You can still you get the virus. But if you're going, are you going to? If you're going to, the rules are if you test positive for COVID, they put you on the PUP list or injury list, and you're unable to participate in stuff. I still need to get paid. I did my job as far as being vaccinated, and they're gonna have to figure that now it's preseason or it's training camp, so it's not a major issue right now. But it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens when you get to the regular season, and if guys are vaccinated and do the things that they need to do, what happens there? You also have got Cole Beasley has been the receiver for Buffalo, has been very vocal about his opposition to getting the vaccine, and that's his personal right, and whatever he wants to do. But if you do not get the vaccine, the rules are going to have to be different for you. You have to be tested more often. You have to be separated more from your teammates, and then if you test positive, it's not going to be your quarantine or your time away from the team may have to be longer. And I think guys need to figure that out. The leagues have to be a little more, figure it out. And it's going to cause internal strife as well. Because Ron Rivera, the cancer survivor, the head coach of the Washington football team, he has expressed disappointment in the lack of vaccinations of his players, not only in his team, but throughout the league. And he obviously, his health is compromised. in a major way due to his personal health. So they're gonna have to figure out a way to get that straightened out and situated before the season starts. And as I said, the vaccination thing, and not to get political, but it's a very personal choice. It's not, and the way I say that, it's a medical issue that's turned political, and I think you're seeing sides. The people are using the politics as a way to either get it or not, and to express their opinions about it when it should be a medical issue. And that translates to everyday life. If you're listening to me at your work or your home, and you have children or not, everyone's dealing with it in that way, and NFL is no different in that. So they're just going to have to figure out the situation as far as that goes. So we'll be keeping track of the NFL as they roll on through that.